We close out Module 4 on the historical setting of the Gospels by looking at some key New Testament rulers. So if we return to our Bible timeline, we left off with these two guys, Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus. But now we want to zoom in on some names that we might recognize from reading the Gospels. Well, so we see Herod the Great. There's also Herod Antipas, Archelaus, Pontius Pilate, Herod Agrippa. These are some of the important leaders that we read about when we study the life of Jesus in the Gospels. So who are they and how did they arrive at the positions we find them when we open up Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Well, let's talk about Herod the Great first. So Herod the Great ruled Judea from 37 BC to 4 AD, which is a long time. He was a great ruler. And 4 AD is right around the time when Jesus comes on the scene. So when we read about Herod, it's at the very end of his leadership, his rulership over Judea. So a couple important things to know about Herod. So first, when civil war broke out between two Roman authorities, Mark Antony and Octavian, Herod was right in the middle. And Herod first sided with Mark Antony. But when Octavian won, Herod switched sides. And he convinced Octavian that he was on his side all along, which proved to be a really important move. Herod was very cunning and very smart. But what happened with Octavian is because of his great victory, when he returned back to Rome, Octavian was promoted. And he was promoted to imperator, which means supreme military leader. So Octavian's victory over Mark Antony was a very significant step for him. And he was actually renamed. He was given a new name called Caesar Augustus. So when we read about Caesar Augustus in the New Testament, it is this guy, Octavian, who had just come off this incredible victory over Mark Antony. And what this event does is it marks the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. But for Herod, it's also very significant because Octavian's promotion meant Herod's position of power was now secure in Judea because Herod had aligned himself with Octavian, and Octavian was now kind of the top dog. Herod's position was secure. So Herod was truly the king of the Jews, and he took this position very seriously. Now, we don't have time to really get into all there is to know about Herod, but a couple really important things we need to know. Herod was cunning. He was very clever, but he was constantly suspicious of conspiracy against him. So he was very neurotic and afraid that people were conspiring against him, which makes sense when we read what we read about Herod in the New Testament. For example, in Matthew 2, verses 1 through 2, it says, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him.' When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born." Why did Herod care so much about this? Well, because it was a threat. Herod was the true king of the Jews. But if you remember who Herod's father was, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Herod's father was Antipater, who was not a Jew. He was an Edomite. But to the Romans, he was Jewish enough to be ruler in Judea, but he was never a full Jew. He was an Idumean. He was a descendant of Esau. So the people knew this, and they never saw Herod as a rightful Jewish king, and this infuriated him. So what he did is he tried to earn their favor through a number of ways. He supported synagogue communities. He lowered taxes. But the most important thing that Herod the Great did for the Jews during the time of Rome was by completely renovating their temple. Remember, the second temple that was built under Zerubbabel during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. He took that temple and he massively restored it, and it became the glorious center of Jerusalem. So this is a scale model in Jerusalem today of what Herod's temple looked like, and it was a beautiful centerpiece of the whole city. Here's a couple photos from Accordance Bible Software here of this scale model. Of course, it was destroyed in 70 AD, but this is based on history what it looked like, and it was an incredible sight to behold. And what this did, among many other things, is that it earned Herod the title Herod the Great, and this title comes from his incredible skills at building, because it wasn't in Jerusalem. All over Herod's kingdom, he built incredible structures and incredible military fortresses and all kinds of things that earned him the title Herod the Great, because he truly was a great builder. However, Herod dies shortly after the birth of Christ, right around 4 BC is when he dies, and his sons contest his will because Herod was so paranoid about his will, he changed it 3 times during his life. Well, his sons appealed to Caesar Augustus, and what Caesar Augustus did was he divided up Herod's kingdom amongst his 3 sons. So we remember this slide about kind of what the Roman Empire, the expanse of the Roman Empire, what it looked like. This is actually from the Four Portraits book, this map, and this gives us some of the details about the vast expanse of the Roman Empire during the time of Herod, kind of before and after. This was the full scope of the Roman Empire, but our focus is right there, that little sliver of land right there called Judea. This becomes the focus of the New Testament, of all of Scripture, because we started, if you remember a previous video, this is where the promise was given to Abraham. So this land has been so important. But during the time of Herod, this is a little bit of what it looked like. So if we zoom in on this map, again, coming from the Four Portraits book, you can see where the darker area where Herod's kingdom started and how it grew, those lighter sections there. And the little squares are all fortresses, military fortresses, and the blue dots are military colonies. So Herod was truly gifted in leading military expeditions right there. So there's Jerusalem, right? This is going to be the center going forward of our study of the gospel. But as we kind of just slowly look up the land, all of this was Herod's kingdom during his reign. So Judea, Idumea, Samaria, all the way up into Galilee, all of this became Herod's kingdom. And so if we look at this now, when his sons begin to appeal here, the kingdom started like this. And so what Caesar Augustus did is he divided Herod's kingdom amongst his 3 sons, Archelaus, Herod Antipas, and Philip. So it looked like this after it was divided. So Philip received this northeastern section. Herod Antipas, his second son, received the Galilean region, and Archelaus was given Judea, Samaria, and the region of Idumea as well. But what happened is very important for our study of the Gospels, is that you can see right there, Herod Antipas and Archelaus kind of both were leaders at the same time. But if you notice, Archelaus didn't last very long, whereas Herod Antipas lasted much longer. This was because Archelaus was erratic and he was unpredictable. And so Caesar Augustus removed him and replaced him with Roman governors. In fact, when we study the book of Matthew, we notice in these verses, Archelaus is mentioned specifically. Matthew 2:21 and 22 says, "And he rose and he took the child," this is Joseph now, "he took the child Jesus and his mother Mary and went to the land of Israel." This is coming back out of Egypt. "But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he withdrew and he went up to the district of Galilee." So Archelaus was a terrible ruler. Caesar Augustus removes him, and what he does is he places 3 of the Roman governors in his place. So Archelaus is replaced by Roman governors, and there are 3 of them are mentioned specifically in the New Testament. The first one is Pontius Pilate, who of course is significant with the trial of Jesus. But also Felix and Festus, both mentioned in the book of Acts, are also 2 of these Roman governors who were placed in Judea and Samaria when Archelaus failed to rule well. And so Herod becomes a really important person in the background of the New Testament. This is a kind of an overview of his life coming from the Four Portraits book. So this is a really interesting look at Herod the person. He was an incredibly erratic personality, but it was an amazing builder and was important to our study and knowledge of the Gospels. So that's a little bit on the historical setting of the Gospels. We've covered a lot in a short period of time. So we went from the Persian period, which is where the New Testament ends, went through the 3 sections of the Greek period, into the period of the Maccabees and Jewish independence, and finally we have arrived at the Roman period. And so what we want to do now is shift back to the text of Scripture. So in Module 5, we're going to continue going down the text of the Gospels via the harmony of the Gospels, and we are going to go back to Luke chapter 1, and we're going to take a look at the birth of John the Baptist being foretold to Zacharias.